Frank chewing or no?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's cute.
Like aggressive ASMR.
That's funny. All right, here we go, folks. We'll start off with chapter 18. Because really, guys, the progressive chapter, it covers really like 3 or 4 chapters. It covers all the way from the start of big business all the way through like the start of World War I with Woodrow Wilson. And I want to remind you that on page number 662 of your textbook, you can find a list of like 25 different progressive legislation achievements. You don't need to know most of them, guys, but you should probably know like 5 achievements, whether they're constitutional amendments, like the direct selection of senators, or like the Prohibition Amendment, or whether they're laws striking down certain things, or regulating certain industries, like with the Sherman Antitrust Act. Open your textbook and look at 662, and you guys should simply know a couple of them. Knowing the national parks, that's one of the progressive achievements. The Pure Food and Drug Act after Sinclair's The Jungle. Those are the types of things on that list, and so I'm just asking you to know what like 5 of them are. So I just want to go through this real quick, guys. This is, I think, the most important one on here, because this is about comparing and contrasting Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. This is not so much a progressive topic, but this is just kind of where it falls chronologically. I'm going to remind you who both men are really quickly. They are both very prominent African-American, essentially not reformers, but they're prominent African-American spokesmen, essentially. Booker T. Washington's an ex-slave. He advocates for African-American owned businesses, for industrial education. He creates the Tuskegee University, and he really says that in a very famous speech. It's called the Atlanta Compromise, that we can be separate races. He kind of sees this Plessy v. Ferguson decision about segregation. And he says, you know what? We just have to worry about focusing on what white people respect, and that's industry, and that's economics, and that's money. Once we have accomplished that as a race, then we'll get respect from white people. We shouldn't focus on trying to change laws and trying to legislate equality. We can't change the minds of these racist people. So let's just focus on improving the race and getting Black-owned businesses, essentially, in industrial education. That's Booker T. Washington. He's kind of known as the great compromiser by other African Americans at the time. He's certainly a well-loved African American leader, but he's definitely not reflecting the idea of what W.E.B. Du Bois would call the new Negro. The don't sit back and take it. Don't let someone call you a boy when you're really a man. We should not have to wait for equality. This is America, and we're citizens. We should demand equality now. And if we can't change the minds and hearts of racist white people, then the courts should implement laws to protect us in this case. Very different approach than Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington was a slave, guys, so I think his mentality makes a lot more sense. He was a former slave. W.E.B. Du Bois never was. He grew up a free man in Massachusetts. He went to Harvard. He's highly educated. Someone who's highly educated is going to be much more willing to try to use the law and the legal system to achieve equality. So being able to distinguish between the two men. W.B. Du Bois will found the NAACP, and you have to know what that group is, guys. It's a lobbying organization. If you want to win political rights for yourself, you need a team of lawyers essentially working for you. That's what the NAACP will do. They'll be involved in a huge number of civil rights cases all the way up through the 1960s, and they're still super active today. In fact, with Brown v. Board, we talked about that yesterday in our Supreme Court cases video. Brown v. Board, guys, that's brought by the NAACP. So just know who they are, and you must be able to compare and contrast Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. You should know what social Darwinism is, folks. That's just the idea of, the survival of the fittest. And during industrialization, a lot of people use that to explain the haves and the have-nots. This is also going to be the time when we're approaching the Spanish-American War. That's not this chapter or the next one, but be aware this idea about social Darwinism is really a thing after Charles Darwin's theories of natural selection come out. And it will be applicable to all sorts of industrial situations. We'll talk real quick, preservation and conservation. You need to know what preserving landscapes are. It's leaving them untouched, like national parks, John Muir. Conservation is just the wise management. It's not wasting things. It's recognizing that we need to use resources, but we should just manage their use wisely so they're not wasted. Industrialization has shown Americans that our natural resources are kind of being exploited, and environmental damage is occurring at a really, really alarming rate. So this idea about either preserving them like a holy temple, like John Muir would say, or just simply trying to conserve them and use them wisely, like Gifford Pinchot would say. National parks are preservation, no hunting, no logging. National forests are conservation. Yeah, there's selective logging, there's selective mining. You can totally hunt during certain seasons. All that stuff is just permitted and regulated. You must know examples. Cool. I don't really want to say too much more, guys. We already talked Plessy Ferguson. That's the separate but equal Supreme Court case, so you know that. Understand what industrialization does to the middle class, guys. We have these new consumer spaces. Be aware that things like department stores are coming about. They call this kind of the Victorian age in American society, the 1880s, 1890s. Be aware of what the rising middle class is doing. We're buying mass-produced items. The Sears Roebuck catalog is a thing. Start to be aware that this consumer society and consumer spaces are developing in this industrialized society. Talk Booker T and Atlanta Compromise. You should know that WCTU, that's Women's Christian Temperance Movement. Cool. And the only other really thing I want to say is the social. Well, no, I'm not even going to mention that. It's not going to come up. So I think that's the most important stuff off this chapter, guys. Is there more? Of course there is more. Every chapter has way more, but we've got to find some stuff to cut. And in my opinions, those are the most important things on this chapter. Any questions on like Booker T. Washington, conservation, preservation, or any of this other vocabulary that you see in front of you guys? Nope. Okay, sweet. Then I'm going to move on to the next chapter. We'll do it in about 15 minutes. And I do want to open up my slides for this next one. This is the progressive era one. And I do just want to open up chapter 19 real quick. Sorry, I should have had that done already. Chapter 19 slides. And again, guys, this is about the rise and the reform of industrial cities. And so this is when I showed you the skyscrapers clip. You have to understand that steel and electricity are how we're rebuilding the modern city. You know, before steel and electricity, you could only build these things 4 or 5 stories tall. With the advent of electricity, we can significantly increase the height of these buildings utilizing the space. Will you be tested on this stuff? Not necessarily, guys. This could probably be historical context, though. If you're writing an essay about the industrial era or about the progressive era, this stuff could maybe be some context. Understanding public transportation and connectivity. That's why I showed that subway clip and stuff. And even understanding city culture, guys. Are you going to be tested on this directly? No, but it's helpful to understand that this is kind of the beginning of modern city culture. What you would recognize as city culture when you guys, whether you're going away to college, somewhere far away, or you're going to stay locally, you guys are going to be going out, and enjoying nightlife relatively soon, within a couple of years. And you're going to see that the nightlife you're going to see in like 2022 and 2023, it's not that much different than what the nightlife was in 1919, believe it or not. And that's what I was trying to show on these 2 slides. Probably not that important for the AP test. This is what's more important, guys. It's the progressive movement. We already did this in the DBQ, but you've got to be able to make a claim about whether or not they were successful and then back that up with examples. So remember, industrialization has brought a lot of positives. It's brought connectivity. It's brought convenience. It's brought economic power. It's brought a new middle class. It's brought a lot of wealth to a lot of Americans, but it's also resulted in some negative things. We've got child labor issues. We've got issues with our food and medicine safety. We've got dangerous working conditions. We've got public health issues. And we've also have issues with big business and corporations really having their hands in politics, essentially trust and monopolies controlling politics, and also political corruption itself with political machines. Tammany Hall is the best example of that. And this isn't the place where I'm going to really explain how the political machines work, but I can, if you have a question on that, speak up, guys, and I can do my best to try to explain it. We talked about muckraking, stirring up the muck. This is investigative journalism, folks. Some of muckraking is positive reporting. Others is just sensational journalism. It's kind of what the underbelly. I like to watch the murder drama shows. I like Forensic Files and stuff like that. That's kind of investigative journalism. It's not exactly the same thing, but even investigative journalism about, worker safety issues they're still going on today, guys. I like investigative journalism about environmental issues. So that's modern examples of it, but know who the muckrakers are. The 2 easiest ones are Upton Sinclair's The Jungle and Jacob Riis's How the Other Half Lives. There are definitely others. If you're given a topic on this, guys, you might be given a source by like Ida Tarbell or McClure. It's okay if you don't remember them, but recognize, oh, that's muckraking literature. They're investigating. Ida Tarbell is someone who investigates Standard Oil. I don't remember teaching about her talking about her in Mahoney's class, but I can read that she's investigating Standard Oil. This is a muckraker. So anyhow, they're highlighting the major issues of the era and the plight of many of the workers. Please know the Pure Food and Drug Act. It's one of the major outcomes of Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle. And The Jungle, guys, isn't just about gross meat packing. It's about the immigrant experience during the industrial area. It's only about 40 or 50 pages dedicated to the meat packing plants. The rest of the novel is about the immigrant experience, living in a tenement house, finding alcohol as a way to, essentially numb your pain and numb your despair from kind of the crappy factory life you're working. That's what the book's really about. It will result in the Pure Food and Drug Act. Creates the FDA. We're now going to have oversight and regulation of our food production, essentially, and not only of our food, of our medicine. How the other half lives, the photojournalism, remembering stuff about like, oh, he used a flash bulb that was brand new. That's cool if you can remember it, but not the most important. This is getting people interested in the causes that progressives are pushing, guys. People know that poor people exist, but these books put it in your face and you can't ignore it. It's going to cause many middle-class reformers to want to get involved in these issues. Cool. So know what tenements are, know those issues, and know political machines. I have these on slides. You guys can check them out if you want to. Trading votes for jobs, essentially. Giving your friends the government contracts. If you did that progressive DBQ that I assigned, I believe I called it practice DBQ number 2. That's what the Ida Tarbell, what the Jane Addams source was about in document 1. It wasn't about Hull House, or it wasn't about settlement houses. It was about reforming political machines and reforming local politics. Another cool part of the progressive movement, guys, that I like is parks. It's the City Beautiful movement. It's an obscure component, but this would be great outside evidence, because if you're writing a DBQ on the progressive era, don't think you're going to get a source on the City Beautiful movement. But please be aware that early in the 19-teens, urban areas started to try to be very conscious of how they can create green spaces. How can we connect neighborhoods with walking paths and green belts? And I love that. It's one of the things I value most in urban areas is the park space. And so just please be aware that this whole profession of landscape designing is going to take on new importance. Landscape design and architecture has been around a long time. I mean, since the 1860s, really, with Frederick Law Olmsted and Central Park in New York. But it's going to take on a more importance in this progressive era, more and more parks and green space. Know the social settlements. There to provide the services to the immigrants in their neighborhoods. If you're working a 12 or 13-hour day and your English is really limited, you need services in your neighborhood. Hopefully someone that maybe even can speak your language or help you navigate. I might need someone to help with childcare. I might need someone to help out with employment assistance. We need basic medical care. Women still need to, be given sanitary assistance and post and prenatal care during and after pregnancies. Remember, guys, there's a serious amount of discrimination against these immigrants, and many of the Jewish and Catholics aren't allowed to participate at the YMCA and stuff like that on the athletic fields or swim in the pools. New opportunities for them at the social settlement houses, even if it's just recreation opportunities. They'll have little credit unions and banking and loan savings programs, these immigrants. The goal of these is to put the services in the neighborhoods where they are needed. If the service is, 5 miles away, I can't really walk there. Yeah, maybe I could take the subway, but it's difficult. I want the service in my neighborhood if it's going to be most effective. And that's the goal of the social settlements. Hull House is the most famous one. A bridge between the classes, meaning the social classes. So there we go. That's all I've got for this one, folks. That's my progressive lecture right there. You've got to be able to make a claim about it. And the easiest claim to make is that the progressive era is incredibly, I don't remember the language of the prompt. The progressive era will make a large number of achievements and cause a lot of social and political change, while simultaneously leaving out African Americans and really not causing a lot of social change in regards to race relations. Something like that. I don't love how I worded that. In fact, I don't like how I worded that at all, but any of you who have been watching these videos and have gone through the DBQ practice know exactly what I'm trying to say. The progressive movement was very effective. It caused a lot of social and political change. However, it essentially left out African Americans, and that's what the DBQ showed us with that source from W.E.B. Du Bois. Guys, the federal government was desegregated in the 1870s. There was black and whites working together in the 1870s, 80s, 90s, 1910s. It was when Woodrow Wilson took office in the 19-teens that he resegregated the U.S. government. All of a sudden, black and white postal clerks couldn't work together. All these different civil servants working in the U.S. government were now working in segregated offices. He essentially reaffirms that white supremacy and Jim Crow is all good. He screens Birth of a Nation in the White House, for God's sakes. So that's part of that why I include that in the thesis, why the progressives are going to leave out African Americans in this, despite causing a lot of other positive social and political change. One other progressive reform, guys, that I think is really, really important to get, or two more. It's on page 662. I don't have it on slides, but they're just my two really important reforms. And they're actually constitutional. Well, one of them is a constitutional amendment. It's the 17th Amendment, and that allows for the U.S. For the direct election of senators. Now, that's really important. Does anyone know who our senators, one of our senators? I actually even only know one of them. Who's our second one? Damn it. I know Kamala Harris. Who's our second senator? Oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. You've heard of Kamala Harris, though, before, I hope, right? Silence.
Yeah, I have.
One person has. Kamala Harris is one of our senators, folks, and we got to vote for her in 2016. We voted her as our senator in 2016.
Mahoney, are you thinking of Dianne Feinstein?
Yes, that's who I can't believe I forgot Dianne Feinstein. Thank you. It's Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris.
I get a lot of emails from Kamala Harris asking for like support and stuff. I'm like, I don't want these emails.
You've been identified somehow as a moderate Democrat on a mailing list or something, and so they're like sending you being targeted by them. But anyhow, the point I was trying to make, guys, is the 17th Amendment allows the citizens to directly elect senators. Before the 19-teens, you did not get to vote on who your state senator is. And frankly, guys, senators are some of the most powerful politicians in the nation. There's only 100 of them, 2 for each state. And before the 19-teens, you did not get to vote on them. The state legislature got to vote on them. So you voted for the state legislature. You voted for a couple hundred guys to represent your state. But then that group of just a few hundred men got to elect the senator. There's a lot of corruption involved in that, folks. Basically, if you didn't have the approval of this elite club of a few hundred men, you could not become senator. And so it was viewed as a really corrupt process before the 19-teens. And so that is why the 17th Amendment is so important. Did we totally freeze? Can you hear me? Did you hear any of that? Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
I just wanted to highlight 17th Amendment. That's the direct election of senators. It's an obscure one, but I think it's really important. If you're trying to say that they caused huge political change, that is a freaking huge political change, the direct election of senators. Also, the recall and the referendum. All of a sudden, if I get enough signatures, you're telling me I can get something put on the ballot that the citizens vote on? I just got to get X number of signatures? That's huge. You're telling me if we've got a politician that we've elected and they suck, we can recall them? Yes. That is direct power to the people, and that's a huge political change. Hopefully you've got the progressive era down, guys. You don't have to be an expert in it, but make that claim and defend it with a few things. I'll say it one more time. In Mahoney's opinion, and in the opinion of many historians, it's not like my opinion's original. I stole this shit from them. The progressive era was really successful at bringing about large amounts of social and political change. However, the rights of African Americans were totally left out, and in fact, their situation became worse during the progressive era. I can defend that. Again, guys, this is a first draft. If I'm typing a term paper that I've got a week on, I'm going to wordsmith that, and it's going to be perfect after I do 4 drafts of a thesis. But first draft, man, that's fine. I've been thinking about this dang prompt for so long that mine should be better by now, but whatever. I'm still freestyling, and it's morning, and I'm hungry, and I'm done with this lecture. Any questions before we stop recording? Okay. Hey, Jack Walsh. Yesterday you asked me